Okay, hopefully this is working correctly. So this is going to be Oronooko, a read through of the full text. Okay, but if you need to pause at any point, you should be able to do so. All right, so this is our title page. It's called Oronooko, or the Royal Slave, and the author is Africa. I do not pretend in giving you the history of this royal slave to entertain my reader with adventures of a famed hero, whose life and fortunes fancy may manage at the poet's pleasure, nor in relating the truth, designed to adorn it with any accidents, but such as arrived in earnest to him, and it shall come simply into the world, recommended by its own proper merits and natural intrigues, there being enough of reality to support it, and to render it diverting without the addition of invention. I was myself an eyewitness to a great part of what you will find here set down, and what I could not be a witness of. I received from the mouth of the chief actor in this history, the hero himself, who gave us the whole transactions of his youth, and though I shall omit for brevity's sake 1,000 little accidents of his life, which, however pleasant to us, where history was scarce and adventures very rare, yet might prove tedious and heavy to my reader in a world where he finds diversions for every minute new and strange. But we who were perfectly charmed with the character of this great man were curious to gather every circumstance of his life. All right, guys, so this is the author. This is from the point of view of the author. And she is going to be telling us about the adventures of Oronooko. And she's going to be telling us who he is from her point of view. The scene of the last part of his adventures lies in a colony in America called Suriname in the West Indies. Okay, so she's giving us an insight into where his story is going to end, but she also needs to give us some background about this colony. So she says, but before I give you the story of this gallant slave, 'tis fit I tell you the manner of bringing them to these new colonies, those they make use of their not being natives of the place, but those we live with in perfect amity, without daring to command them, but on the contrary, caress them with all the brotherly and friendly affection in the world, trading with them for their fish, venison, buffalo skins, and little rarities, as marmosets, a sort of monkey, as big as a rat or weasel, but of marvelous and delicate shape, having face and hands like a human creature, and Kusheries, a little beast in the form and fashion of a lion, as big as a kitten, but so exactly made in all parts like that noble beast that it is in miniature. Then for the little parakeetos, great parrots, macaws, and 1,000 other birds and beasts of wonderful and surprising forms, shapes, and colors. For skins of prodigious snakes, of which there are some 60 yards in length, as is the skin of one that may be seen at His Majesty's antiquaries, where are also some rare flies of amazing forms and colors, presented to him by myself, some as big as my fist, some less, and all of various excellencies, such as art cannot imitate. Then we trade them for feathers, which they order into all shapes, make themselves little short habits of them, and glorious wreaths for their heads, necks, arms, and legs, whose tinctures are unconceivable. I had a set of these presented to me, and I gave them to the king's theater, and it was the dress of the Indian queen, infinitely admired by persons of quality, and was unimitable. Besides these, 1,000 little knacks and rarities in nature, and some of art, as their baskets, weapons, aprons, etc., etc. We dealt with them with beads of all colors, knives, axes, pins, and needles, which they used only as tools to drill holes with in their ears, noses, and lips, where they hang a great many little things, as long beads, bits of tin, brass or silver beat thin, and any shining trinket. The beads they weave into aprons about 1/4 of an ell long and of the same breadth, working them very prettily in flowers of several colors, which apron they wear just before them, as Adam and Eve did the fig leaves. The men wearing a long strip of linen, which they deal with us for. They thread these beads also onto long cotton threads, and make girdles to tie their aprons to, which come 20 times or more about the waist, and then cross like a shoulder belt both ways around their necks, arms, and legs. This adornment, with their long black hair and the face painted in little specks or flowers here and there, makes them a wonderful figure to behold. Some of the beauties, which indeed are finely shaped, are almost all are and who have pretty features are charming and novel, for they have all that is called beauty, except the color, which is a reddish yellow, or after a new oiling, which they often use to themselves. They are the color of a new brick, but smooth, soft, and sleek. They are extreme modest and bashful, very shy, and nice of being touched. And though they are seen all thus naked, if one lives forever among them, there is not to be seen another indecent action or glance. And being continually used to see one another so unadorned, so like our first parents before the fall, it seems as if they had no wishes, there being nothing to heighten curiosity. But all you can see, you see at once, and every moment see. And where there is no novelty, there can be no curiosity. Okay, so guys, this section, just to summarize, she is talking about the native inhabitants of this island um, in Suriname, and this is in South America. Okay, so at this time, not many white or British individuals would have had the opportunity to see a native, and so she is describing the natives in as best detail as she can, as well as the surrounding area. So talking about the different types of animals that they have. She's talking here about fish, venison and buffaloes, monkeys. Okay. And then as we get down here, we um, get into what the people themselves look like. Okay, there are leaders. She calls them the Indian Queen. Okay, that may not have been what they were called within their native group. She also describes them as being almost naked in appearance, especially for Europeans at the time who would have been fully clothed, as we think of with long dresses going down to their arms and ankles. So this was very new to them, seeing individuals who essentially were walking around with very little clothing. And that these clothings were basically made of threads and beads. Um, and then we're getting introduced to courtship between the natives of this island. So she says, not, but I have seen a handsome young Indian dying for love of a very beautiful young Indian maid, but all his courtship was to fold his arms, pursue her with his eyes, and sighs were all his language. While she, as if no such lover were present, or rather as if she desired none such, carefully guarded her eyes from beholding him, and never approached him, but she looked down with all the blushing modesty I have seen in the most severe and cautious of our world. And these people represented to me an absolute idea of the first state of innocence, before a man knew how to sin. And 'tis most evident and plain that simple nature is the most harmless, inoffensive, and virtuous mistress. 'Tis she alone, if she were permitted, that better instructs the world than all the inventions of man. Religion would here but destroy that tranquillity they possess by ignorance and laws, but would teach them to no offense, of which they have no notion. Now, this part is important because she is saying that despite their appearance, despite how they look, mostly unclothed, she said that their behavior and interactions between one another is much better and much more appropriate and modest than is even seen among Europeans. So she's saying that in their courtships, they're very respectful of each other's bodies. They don't treat one another in any type of unkind or uncaring way. And that actually, if someone were to introduce them to the laws or language and anything in Europe, it would actually introduce them to sort of a sinful nature, which they haven't been exposed to. And she compares them to Adam and Eve and saying that it's almost like being in a world before there was ever sin, before there was any type of harm towards women or between men or murder or anything like that, because she said they're some of the most innocent acting people that she's ever met. And that if religion were introduced to them, it would cause more harm than good, which is a really unique stance to have, especially at that time when many other Europeans would have considered these people as savages and would have had the opposite view that they needed to be introduced to modern society and religion. Continuing on, they once made mourning and fasting for the death of the English governor who had given his hand to come on such a day to him, and neither came nor sent, believing when a man's word was passed, nothing but death could or should prevent his keeping it. And when they saw he was not dead, they asked him what name they had for a man who promised a thing he did not do. The governor told them such a man was a liar, which was a word of infamy to a gentleman. Then one of them replied, Governor, you are a liar and guilty of that infamy. They have a native justice which knows no fraud, and they understand no vice or cunning, but when they are taught by the white man. They have a plurality of wives, which when they grow old, serve those that succeed them, who are young, but with a servitude and easy respected, unless they take slaves in war, they have no other attendants. So in this part, she is also saying that when it comes to justice within their community, they don't know or understand what lying is. So she said, they even went so far as to believe that this person had died, the English governor, because he had promised to come and talk to them. And when he didn't, they believed he was dead because there was no other reason that he shouldn't have come. And so when they saw that he was not dead, they asked him, if you're not dead, then what could have possibly prevented you from telling us or letting us know that you weren't coming? And he said, and so they said, is there a word? We don't have a word in our culture. And he says a liar. And then so they accuse him of being a liar. And he's offended by that because it's such a rude word in English to be called a liar. You don't want to be called that. But they had no other explanation for what he had done to them. She also talks about that by a plurality of wives, they have multiple wives. But they're always respected and taken care of. And it says, unless they take slaves in war, they don't have any other attendants. All right, so continuing on, it says, those on that continent where I was had no king, but the oldest war captain was obeyed with great resignation. So again, because this is during the time of colonies, there's not necessarily a leader present. All right, so the leader is an old war captain, and basically his word is considered law. And so if there's any type of conflict or concern, they would have to take it to the war captain. A war captain is a man who has led them on to battle with conduct and success, of whom I shall have occasion to speak more hereafter, and of some other of their customs and manners as they fall in my way. With this said, as I said, we live in perfect tranquility and good understanding, as it behooves us to do, they knowing all the places where to seek the best food of the country and the means of getting it, and for very small and invaluable trifles supply us with that 'tis impossible for us to get. For they do not only in the woods and over the savannas and hunting supply the parts of hounds by swiftly scouring through those almost impassable places, and by the mere activity of their feet run down the nimblest deer and other evil beasts. But in the water, one would think they were gods of rivers or fellow citizens of the deep. So rare an art they have in swimming, diving, and almost living in water, and by which they command the less swift inhabitants of the floods. And then for shooting, what they cannot take or reach with their hands, they do so with arrows, and have so admirable an aim that they will split almost a hair, and at any distance that arrow can reach, they will shoot down oranges and other fruit, and only touch the stalk with the dart's point, that they may not hurt the fruit, so that they being on all occasions very useful to us, we find it absolutely necessary to caress them as friends, and not to treat them as slaves, nor dare we do other, their numbers so far surpassing ours in that continent. Okay, so in this conclusion here, she says not only is their friendship based on them being like absolutely trustworthy, but additionally that the Europeans there really struggle with knowing the land, knowing how to get food and all of that. And this is something that the natives to that land are very good at. And additionally to knowing the land and being able to maneuver it well, they're excellent hunters, they're excellent swimmers, and do almost everything better than the Europeans who are living there. And so the Europeans rely on that friendship to survive. Okay, so I'm going to stop that section right here and continue with a part 2.